At the beginning of their chapter on musical understanding in Music Matters 2, David Elliott and Marissa Silverman remind us that most of the world's 7 billion people don't ask music teachers to help them value, love, or respond deeply to their favourite musics. So, if most people are okay to value, love, and respond deeply to musics, what do we have to offer as music educators? First of all, we have something unique. We have music, which Christopher Small defines as a verb. Music is something people do. Hello, I'm Brad Fuller. In this presentation, Peter Orenstein and I would like to share with you how one simple phrase, "It's all about the gig," helped us to reimagine music education in our secondary school music classroom and develop an approach we call gig-based learning, or GBL.
So the hint for us is in the definition, people doing. And looking to our New South Wales music syllabus, we see the purpose of classroom music education is to provide students with the opportunity to do music. But people can do music at home or in the community. So the real value of classroom music education is to offer a space that provides opportunities for people to do music together. Returning to the 3 New South Wales secondary music syllabi, the word opportunity or opportunities appears 47 times. Let's take a look at a couple. The purpose of the years 7 to 10 syllabus is to provide students with the opportunity. The purpose of Music 1 is to provide students with the opportunity. The purpose of Music 2 is to provide students with the opportunity. According to our syllabi, we are not required, as Frary said, to give the students knowledge or to impose upon them the model of the good man by preaching in the desert. We can recast ourselves as providers of opportunities, except as musicians, we don't call them opportunities. We call them gigs. Reimagining these opportunities as gigs affords us the opportunity to examine every facet of classroom music education, starting with the classroom itself.
Nair challenges us to create infrastructure responses to an educational philosophy. As we've described, our educational philosophy is that the space or classroom should provide opportunities for people to do music, which we call gigs, together. Therefore, our infrastructure response should be to create a classroom that promotes exactly this. Advances in technology allow us to consider additional spaces that can work in conjunction with the physical space, the virtual space, and the technological space.
Extending Nair's challenge, Harris 2010 urges us to conceive of a convergence of spaces, which draws together the virtual, pedagogic, and physical spaces in meaningful ways so that learning can focus forward. Following Harris 2010, we have designed a recursive, convergent model of space design, where each of the 4 spaces, pedagogical, physical, virtual, and technological, are dynamic. As we modify each space, it offers new affordances and challenges which have a flow-on effect to the other spaces and so on. Each space must be designed and modified to promote opportunities for people to do music, i.e. gigs, together. This process is complex and difficult for staff, let alone students, to explain, understand, and remember. So this might be a good time to introduce the origin story of It's All About the Gig.
Growing up in the 1970s, I watched loads of sitcoms, grew to love and appreciate a well-crafted catchphrase, and was aware of how sticky they can be. 2 key readings prompted me to develop my catchphrase concept with Peter. The first was from a Fast Company blog post about isms, which said, "An ism is a suffix that refers to a strong principle or belief. It is a set of values so powerful it drives behaviour and serves as a beacon for those who subscribe. The best companies and leaders have isms of their own, driving their success."
The second reading from Think Simple by Ken Siegel encouraged us to develop isms to capture our foundation principles that would help us carry culture. He says there is tremendous power in the ability to effectively distill. Distilling information to its essence makes it easier to remember and harder to forget.
According to Segal, our isms could eliminate the need for complicated rules and procedures and give us the freedom to work in our own individual way. We found this quote especially powerful from the CEO of the Container Store, Kip Tyndall. We're not smart enough to tell thousands of employees what to do in a given situation. We can't tell thousands of employees how to answer the phone. We don't even attempt to do that. What we do is get people to agree on these very simple ends. Then we liberate them to choose the means to those ends. We unshackle them to use their own creative genius.
We took up Siegel's call to become agents of simplicity by attempting to distill our music education philosophy and the requirements of our syllabi into our foundation principles, with the aim to unshackle ourselves and our students to use our creative genius.
This links back to Kantian philosophy and Kantian ethics. Philosophers call Fast Company's isms maxims, a concise expression of a fundamental principle which motivates specific actions. So as agents of simplicity, we meld the stickiness of 70s sitcom catchphrases with isms and fold in some Kantian ethics to distill our music education philosophy into the maxim, it's all about the gig.
In just 3 maxims, we can carry the culture of our pedagogical space. Our welcome to show business maxim captures the syllabus instruction that students should work together with others and engage in activity that reflects the real-world practice of performers, composers, and audiences. In other words, do gigs.
It also encompasses the Deweyan notion that educative experiences are those that foster learning through experiences which make direct, vital appeal. Rather than training to be musicians in a remote future, Welcome to Show Business initiates teachers and students into the tradition of show business. But again, this is a Deweyan understanding of tradition, whereby learners are released and directed, not confined and restricted. Similar to before, we can recast ourselves not as teachers and students, but as musicians.
As musicians, Elliott and Silverman 2014 remind us that it's not only the musical processes or creative achievements of a tradition that musicians need to learn, but the musical social significance of the praxis/tradition itself. This means that our identity as musicians and our membership within the show business fraternity furnishes the rules of engagement for us to operate within that community. This is the real world practice that the syllabus encourages, but in the sense of the here and now rather than the there and then.
Following this real-world logic from the syllabus, as musicians, when we think of the phrase work with others, we might recast that as be in a band. So using a variety of grouping strategies, we place every student in a band. Sometimes our students say, I don't even play an instrument, or my family isn't musical. But we say being in a band isn't about being musical or playing an instrument, it's a state of mind. You just start with the vibe. In fact, Rolling Stones' legendary drummer Charlie Watts, R.I.P., famously said that 90% of being a musician is waiting. So we say, let's get good at waiting, or learning to hang out with people. That's 90% of the job. The other 10% is practicing, rehearsing, and performing. So let's start with the 90%, being in a community and putting on the musician's mindset. We can work the 10% out together as we go. Rather than waiting for something to happen in the future, let's get busy right now. Welcome to show business. You're in a band. Oh, and by the way, you've got a gig.
It's important to think about this as teachers too. Oftentimes we've noticed that when music teachers come into school, they leave their musician selves at the door. Kind of like the Live Aid approach when they said, check your ego at the door. But this time, music teachers check their musicianship at the school gate, come in and conform to what we think the man wants us to be. We become all teachery and forget that we're actually musicians at our core. We have the mindset and disposition of musicians.
And so we want to keep front of mind that actually this is show business. We're musicians. We know things. We know how to put on a show. We know how to make things magical. We know how to make things interesting. We know how to make people feel like, wow, that's a really scarce thing. I want to be a part of that. Which leads us to a call to arms by Elliott and Silverman to be informed musician teachers who possess a considerable breadth and depth of musical and educational understandings. So teachers, welcome to show business too. Bring your pizzazz, bring your razzle-dazzle, Bring your smoke and mirrors.
We began with our maxim, it's all about the gig. In the modern music industry, a gig could be all manner of strange things. So we use the word gig to stand in for any experience, product, evidence, or artifact by a certain deadline. Let's unpack it some more and see how it can remind us of other syllabus obligations. For example, allow students to develop their capacity to manage their own learning, and students are encouraged to acquire skills to become self-directed learners.
Gigs can be a ratchet to impel musicians to study, write, source, and rehearse music by the opportunity to share the created product with an audience. Whether it's a performance, analysis, or composition, the proof is in the musical pudding, which is why for us, it's all about the gig. Furthermore, our syllabi remind us that learning in music occurs best when these experiences, performance, composition, musicology, oral, are integrated with each other. The gig is the ideal container to integrate the learning experiences.
Gigs are conducive to high levels of participation, student agency, collaboration, and growth, as they have deadlines, high expectations, occur regularly, demand meticulous preparation and teamwork, and promote rigorous individual and corporate reflection. This is connected to our syllabus across several different entries. For example, through performance and other related activities, a musician leads critical evaluation and discussion sessions on all aspects of his/her own performances and the performances of others.
We want our students to feel the same sense of urgency that we feel as gigging musicians, to have the opportunity to try stuff out on the bandstand and then talk about it in the green room afterwards. This is the essence of gig-based learning. It's all about the gig.
Our third foundation principle is music with people, for people. This maxim sits underneath It's All About the Gig to remind us of the importance of community and the social component of musicking. So many times over the years, we've seen schools bring people on buses for miles and miles, hours and hours, and then they sit there quietly and do their own work. And that does our head in. We find it ironic that you'd come to school and do your own quiet work when we have this wonderful human resource, people. So a big driver for us was to think about when people come to school with people, we want them to create and experience music with people. And then it's all about the gig when we play for people.
For people has another crucial meaning in that it reminds us that we want music to also be working for the people making it and listening to it. We never want to put the importance of the gig before the person making and or listening to the music. Elliott and Silverman remind us that music can help people achieve life goals and values for themselves and others. They summarize this as a life of human flourishing. Consequently, this maxim carries our culture that says every gig must promote human flourishing for everyone involved, now and into the future. These experiences should also promote the lifelong love and pursuit of musical experiences as outlined in our syllabi. So, there are our three philosophical underpinnings or our pedagogical space.
Our three maxims, welcome to show business, it's all about the gig, music with people, for people, articulate our philosophy which informs the way we design and recursively redesign the physical space. To remind us that we're in show business, we use a fourth maxim to inform our approach to physical space, creating magical and inspiring space that allows students to make music at the speed of thought.
Putting our foundation principles to work, we begin to see how the pedagogical space determines the physical space, but must also remember this is a recursive process. As we reflect in action, we notice new affordances offered by the physical space that makes new pedagogical approaches possible, which may require further modifications to the physical space, and so on. For example,
welcome to show business. The space should be a magical, inspiring place that promotes opportunities for musicians to engage in real-world practices of performers, composers, and audiences which make direct vital appeal. It's all about the gig. If it's all about the gig, you wouldn't study music in a classroom, right? You'd need a space to prepare for the gig, to do the gig, and to celebrate and reflect on the gig. The classroom becomes the venue. Music with people, for people. The space should promote communication and collaboration, especially between bandmates. Musicians need spaces to music together, but also to hang out with each other. Music at the speed of thought. The space should promote creativity. The space should also aim for zero latency between the spark of an idea and the time it takes to capture that spark.
This is how we brought our maxims to life.
Here we go. Check this out.
The virtual space is a platform or environment where people can interact, which is facilitated by networked computers. Our school's approach was that every physical class or course has a virtual space complementing the work occurring within the physical realm. Therefore, our job is to articulate our foundation principles into the virtual space in a way that complements our work in the pedagogical and physical spaces. It's all about the gig mandates that our virtual space must work with the other spaces to enable musicians to prepare for, undertake, capture, disseminate, and reflect on the gig.
As technology advances, it allows for further optimization of music with people for people. We can situate information regarding lesson structure, information, systems, and content in the virtual space to maximize the affordances of face-to-face learning. Utilizing our learning management system as the virtual space removes the friction between student and teacher and reduces the latency in our quest for music at the speed of thought. The virtual space is another location where our musicians can capture their process as they iterate, or as musicians like to say, demo. They can do this via journals, screencasts, online multimedia, audio and video recordings, and audio interviews. Capturing material in this way allows for collaborative post-performance reflection and evaluation, as our musicians describe and reflect on their creative process individually, with their teachers, and with their peers.
Musicians use all manner of technology in their musicking, and this is also reflected often throughout our syllabi. In fact, the Year 7 to 10 syllabus says students are required to engage with ICT.
We add the technological space to Harris's 2010 model to cover the affordances of electronic musical instruments and computer hardware. All of the equipment in the physical space must work with the other spaces to promote music at the speed of thought. Some examples include the jam stations, where students can get their individual ideas down, do some practice, or work through an online instrument tutorial. V-drums, which allow us to program any sound imaginable, and to conduct silent rehearsals in the main room while other bands work on their gigs in peace. Virtual guitar and bass amplifiers. These also allow us to program any sound imaginable and work in conjunction with the V-drums to facilitate silent rehearsals in the main room.
Let's look at the gig-based learning approach to Stage 4, which is Year 7 and 8 in New South Wales. With our gig-based learning foundation principles at front of mind, we develop our gigs from the syllabus. Our hands-on history of rock and roll gig is a great example of this in action. Let's zoom in on the 50s rock and roll gig. We want to bring the rock and roll of the 50s to life. The gig is for our musicians to form a band, choose an instrument, and learn to play a classic 50s rock and roll song with their band. Every 2 weeks, they'll choose a new 50s rock and roll song and a different instrument. After 5 iterations of this process, each student will have played 5 50s rock and roll songs on 5 different instruments: drums, bass guitar, guitar, keys, and vocals, all with their band live on stage. The gig provides the context to integrate the learning experiences. Performance of the song provides the context for learning about the concepts of music as they apply to the song they will play on the gig. Our musicians can compose and improvise using the materials of 50s rock and roll and use them on the gig. Their listening is focused around how 50s rock and roll performers performed and composed in a way that will help them on the gig. And their musicological research is centered around discussions about how rock and roll evolved at a time filled with opportunities and challenges, just as we live in a time filled with opportunities and challenges. Our infrastructure response to this brief is to create spaces for bands to work together to bring their gig to life. Each member needs a space to practice, a space to compose, a space to rehearse, a space to research, a space to hang out, and a space to perform. This all has to happen for multiple bands all at the same time. By dividing the room into stations designed to facilitate these tasks and rotating bands throughout each of the stations, we can get maximum productivity from minimum resources. The role of the virtual space in this model is to multiply the teacher by providing specific instructions to our musicians at each station. Students take their laptops with them to each station to access a combination of text and video instruction. In this way, students get the information they need, where they need it, and when they need it. As they move to the next station, there will be instructions and information waiting for them. As they create, their work is uploaded to the virtual space, ready to share with their bandmates and teachers for feedback. Each band regularly interacts with their teachers at a checkpoint station within the rotation system. This ensures that every band has a 1 teacher to 7 student interaction at regular intervals. iPads, keyboards with integrated audio interfaces, silent instruments, student headphones, and multiple microphones are crucial enablers, working together with the physical and virtual space to bring the vision to life. The technology allows up to 56 musicians to create music in 8 bands simultaneously and harmoniously in one space, all in view of the teacher. Music with people, for people, in a way that was unimaginable in the 20th century.
Let's look at the gig-based learning approach to Stage 5, which is a Year 9 and 10 in New South Wales. Our approach aims to remove the barriers between artist and technician, art music and popular music, as well as traditional instruments and computer instruments. We do this by creating a narrative arc which is style and genre agnostic, whereby students evolve from cover musicians to original recording artists over a 2-year program. Zooming in on the Like a Version project, our musicians are required to create an episode of a music television show. Inspired by the real-world Triple J program Like a Version, the class splits into bands and chooses a piece from any genre or style and reconstitutes it to create a unique version of the work. The TV show becomes a container for us to integrate the learning experiences. As part of the gig, students produce a studio recording, music video, and behind-the-scenes documentary as evidence of their learning by a certain deadline. As students become more attuned to the process of producing a TV show, each gig becomes less prescriptive to allow for more choice. In each gig, the students choose an artistic and technical role, and all gigs are designed to allow students to mix genres and styles, as well as play as many instruments as possible, including electronic sound sources. The gig is supported by various physical spaces that are designed to facilitate the making of the TV show. We apply our job as agents of simplicity to the physical space so that students spend less time setting up, plugging in, checking levels, and then mixing down and bouncing out recording files. We apply our isms so that we can make music at the speed of thought as we welcome students to show business by giving them authentic physical spaces so that they can practice perfectly, not practice sitting at a desk. The space promotes a creative workflow so that students can take the sounds and ideas from their mind into fruition with as little friction as possible. We call it the Flow Factory. Students demo in the green room using their own device and portable recording equipment. The Jam Station provides space to practice, demo, and refine ideas using a MIDI keyboard connected to a computer or an iPad. The Jam Rooms provide space for rehearsals and recording by having an electronic drum kit, keyboard, microphones, and guitar leads all plugged into an interface and then connected to an iMac. The stage provides a place to do live recordings and performances in larger contexts. And the studio suites provide a place for overdubs, vocal takes, and mixing and mastering post-production. The virtual space houses all of the information that students need to complete the gig and organizes the gig into bite-sized chunks. We call these rotations. And using cloud technology, students can collaborate in real time at school or at home. The virtual space ultimately houses the finished product, as each band contributes content to the TV show's YouTube playlist. The technological space is critical, as electronic instruments and audio interfaces allow instruments to plug in and monitor over headphones, as well as record into digital audio workstations such as GarageBand, Soundtrap, Logic, Ableton, you name it. Technology transforms a typical classroom into a rehearsal facility, performance venue, and a recording studio all in one.
Choosing the gig for Stage 6 is pretty straightforward. It's a concert for 2 or 3 middle-aged people, otherwise known as the HSC exam. In the pedagogical space, the gig is the container for the integration of the learning experiences of performance, composition, musicology, and oral. We choose the most open topics from the syllabus, such as an instrument and its repertoire, and this provides the context for the gig. Year 11 students continue their group musicking from Stage 5, but with increasing autonomy and agency. In Year 12, each student becomes the musical director of their own gig. Year 12 musicians present 1 gig per term, which drives them to find and analyse a piece to play, write an arrangement of the piece, rehearse the piece with bandmates from the class, and make a music documentary film based on the topic that must answer the question, "What's in this for me?" and produce live and video performances of the gig. If a student selects the composition or musicology elective, that becomes their gig for the term, and they're available to play as session cats on other gigs too. This ensemble-based collaborative approach to the HSC allows students to form deep bonds forged in the fiery furnace of the HSC that will create lasting, wonderful memories. We use the physical space in a hybridized way, merging our approaches to stages 4 and 5. Similar to stage 5, students rotate around the room and use the various stations as required. But in addition to teacher check-ins on the stage with their band, students check in one-on-one with their teachers at regular intervals. The virtual space also supports the gig in a similar way to the other years, but is particularly important as the space for students to undertake additional listening and work on any other knowledge or skills they've identified to improve. Rather than everybody working lockstep, as in the traditional approach, musicians can access the virtual space as they need it. Interactions with the teacher are generally conversational and dialogical, as the musicians have had years of carefully scaffolded training in managing their own work and learning, and being able to identify and solve problems as they arise. Of special note in the technological space is how digital mixing technology allows each performer to dial in and save the best possible mix and return to it in every subsequent session. Similar technology allows us to save a unique light show for each performance as well.
By working within our recursive, convergent model of spaces integration, we developed the foundation principles that are embedded into the gig-based learning approach. This has allowed us to develop our music education philosophy alongside the delivery of the New South Wales music syllabi, while removing the barriers between artist and technician, art music and popular music, and traditional and computer instruments by focusing on the best tools to tell the story.
We've shared our maxim, It's all about the gig, to demonstrate how we created a unique solution for our unique context. We hope this might inspire you to take a fresh look at your unique context and perhaps develop some new foundation principles that gives you freedom to work in your own individual way, liberates you to choose your own solutions, and unshackles you and your students to use your own creative genius.